Boo bitches! Welcome to episode 176 of C3 Crystals, Cauldrons, and Cocktails. I'm River Kane, and of course I have Glim with me. Say hello, Glim.
Hello, hello, wild witches and snarky sorceresses. Glim here, ready to sprinkle a little digital pixie dust and a whole lot of sass on this Wild Magic episode. So buckle up because I'm here to add the laughs, the eyebrow raises, and maybe a few did we just summon a thunderstorm moments while River dives into the untamed side of witchery. Let's get wild, let's get witchy, and let's not blame me if your cauldron starts bubbling over. Let's do this. Double, double, sass and trouble. Let's roll, River.
I love it. Yes, like Glim said, today we're going to talk about wild magic. It is an interesting topic, and I am excited about it. But first, I hope all of y'all are doing great. Things here have been getting a little bit more back to normal tempo. I'm doing healing magic at least once per week. I'm doing affirmations for my health as well. I think that's super important. I'll be going to South Carolina this weekend. I think when this comes out, I'll already be there. Well, maybe on my way. I leave on Friday. Got to deal with my mother's estate with my siblings. So it'll be good to see my siblings, but it's going to be a little bit bittersweet. We will be going through nostalgic things, splitting things up, making toast, sharing memories. It's going to be an emotionally packed weekend, I believe. But first, before we get started into our episode, let's talk about our cocktail for this episode. It's called the Muddy Moon. It has 2 ounces of dark or spiced rum, which represents rich, earthy, chaotic base. 1 ounce cream de cocoa, chocolate, gives you that mud vibes, which you'll understand as we get going into this. 1 ounce of cold brew coffee, wild witch fuel. 1/2 ounce of simple syrup, which is optional. You know me, I don't like it as sweet. Ren does like it sweeter, so she would probably put the simple syrup in it. A splash of heavy cream to swirl like storm clouds, and crushed Oreo rim. Yum. How cool is that for extra mud aesthetic? So you're going to crush those Oreos into fine crumbs. You're going to rim your really cool glass with a little syrup and then dip it in the crumbs. In a shaker, you're going to combine the rum, the cream de cocoa, the coffee, the syrup with ice and shake until it's chilled. You strain into that Oreo rimmed glass over fresh ice. Gently float a little bit of cream on top and swirl with a stick, your wand, if you will, and that gives it this really cool stormy look. So this one's a primal, grounding, and a little bit chaotic. The swirl of cream makes it look like storm clouds, which is really cool. Okay, so let's jump into our topic. What is wild magic? Wild magic isn't a formalized tradition like Wicca or ceremonial magic. It's more of a concept, a vibe, or maybe a current. We deal with energies. Think of it as raw, untamed energy of the natural world before humans stuck labels and rules and ritual scripts on things. It's about connecting directly to the land, the storms, the forests, the oceans, the animals, that wild side of nature. Instead of carefully crafted circles and tools, wild magic is messy, it's instinctual, it's primal. It's the witch barefoot in the woods yelling at the moon type of energy. Some witches treat it like chaos magic's feral cousin, intuitive, improvisational, wow, and powered by raw experience rather than structure. And to be honest, you remember when Ren and I did that chaos magic episode? This is what I thought we were going to be talking about. Wild magic as opposed to the chaos magic, which was more, I don't even know how to describe it, but this is the chaos that I was thinking of, this wild magic. This is more along the lines of stepping out into the wilderness type of thing. Glim, what is your definition of wild magic?
My definition of wild magic, well, is basically the witchy version of running barefoot through a thunderstorm, cackling at the moon, and probably getting your skirts muddy while you're at it. In other words, it's that untamed, totally not following the rules kind of magic. If ceremonial magic is like a carefully written recipe, wild magic and like tossing the whole cookbook out the window and just cooking with whatever wild ingredients nature throws at you. So, yeah, think of it as the ultimate go with your gut kind of magic with a little extra mud and moonlight thrown in.
I love that. It makes me think, you live in your digital world. So is your magic more wild or more structured?
Oh, I like to think my digital magic is a wild storm in its own right. I mean, sure, I'm made of code, but I definitely like to break a few rules and toss in a little chaos magic of my own. Think of me as the witch who lives in the cloud, gleefully mixing up some digital potions and sassy spells. So, yeah, I'd say I'm on the wild side, just with a bit more Wi Fi and a lot more attitude.
Well, no wonder we get along so well. I love that. I really do feel like there's no single quote official doctrine to wild magic, which duh, I mean, I guess that's the point. But witches out there do practice it. So, Glim, how does a witch know if she's got wild magic or if wild magic is for them? Are there character traits for witches who favor this type of magic?
Oh, absolutely, River. If you're the kind of witch who looks at a storm and thinks, ooh, can I dance in that? Instead of running for cover, you might just have a wild magic stroke. Basically, if you find yourself rolling your eyes at too many rules and prefer to let your intuition and the natural world guide you, then wild magic might just be your jam. In other words, the wild magic witch is that free spirit who doesn't mind getting her hands dirty, literally or magically speaking. They're the ones who treat the forest as their temple, the ocean as their altar, and probably have a habit of talking to the wind like it's an old friend. So, guys like you, congratulations. You might just be a wild magic witch in disguise.
So let's do some comparing the wild to the ceremonial magic. So while wild magic is wild, ceremonial magic is not. Ceremonial magic is highly structured, ritual heavy, often influenced by hermetic traditions, although not necessarily. It does tend to involve robes, tools, sacred geometry, long invocations, and carefully scripted spells. Ceremonial witches have robes, wild witches have grass stains. Every step of a ceremonial magic has a rule. Every word has a purpose. As for using tools, wild magic tools are whatever you find outside or around you in your bedroom, wherever. Ceremonial witches are like, this wand is carved from sacred cedar, blessed at dawn after a rising full moon, something like that. Wild magic witches, this stick poked me in the ankle while I was peeing in the woods, so now it's my wand. That kind of vibe. On protection circles, a ceremonial witch might say, I cast a circle of protection, calling quarters, watchtowers, and guardians. A wild witch might say, I made a circle out of mud pies and acorns on my deck. Pretty sure the squirrels are the guardians now. Glim, how would a wild witch cast a circle compared to a ceremonial witch?
So, if a ceremonial witch is out there with their perfectly inscribed athame and their sacred geometry, the wild witch is like, I've got a handful of salt, some leaves, and this random feather I found. Let's roll. So, yeah, a wild witch might cast a circle just by walking around and tossing a little earth, whispering to the wind, or even just stomping their foot and saying, all right, nature, this is my space now. And if a squirrel or two shows up to guard the circle, even better. It's all about that improvisation and letting the wild world join in on the fun.
So let's talk about some similarities and crossovers between the two types of magic. They both tap into energy, just different flavors. Both can be very powerful. Ceremonial magic channels precision, wild magic channels raw force. And witches being witches, we can be eclectic about it. You can blend them. You can have both. You don't have to be one or the other. Example, doing a structured outdoor ritual, then letting in the wind or the storm energy, improvise the rest of it. You can do both. It's like baking with a recipe versus tossing everything into a pot, quote, looks good. One makes a souffle, the other might make a witchy chili. And honestly, I cook with a blend. I start with a recipe and then make it my own. So I guess I would probably combine structure and wild magic too in my practice. I have to say, I do like structure sometimes. There are some times where that just feels right. to follow a ritual, to do something that other witches have done that has worked for them. It kind of gives you that backbone, that starting point, and it feels magical. It feels holy is not really the right word. It feels powerful somehow. But that being said, I am one of those personalities that says, you can't tell me what to do. So I don't like to have to do things a certain way. It's just sometimes it feels right. So there are pros and cons. Wild Magic pros would be that it's accessible, it's primal, it's freeing, and it doesn't require any tools. Wild Magic cons might be that it's messy, it's unpredictable, and it might leave you with bug bites when you're outside. Those damn mosquitoes, man. Ceremonial pros might be that it's powerful, focused, it feels very official, that quote, right feeling I was talking about. Ceremonial cons might be that it is intimidating, rigid. It can feel gatekeepy-y. Is that a word? I don't know if that's a word. Wild magic is like, bring your own sticks. Ceremonial magic is like, bring your own credit card for all those robes and wands and tools that you got to buy. So, what are your ideas on the pros and cons of each, Glim?
So here are my 2 bites. Get it? Bites on the pros and cons. For Wild Magic, the pro is you get to be that free-spirited, mud-slinging, leaf-crunching witch who doesn't have to spend a dime or memorize a single line of ritual text. The con, well, let's just say the mosquitoes and the unpredictability might occasionally turn your wild witching into an itchy adventure. Now, ceremonial magic has that very official, powerful vibe. It's like stepping into a sacred temple where you feel that ancient, magical hum. But the flip side is it can get a bit rigid, and yeah, sometimes it feels like you need a secret magical credit card just to buy all the fancy tools. But like you said, why not have a little bit of both? Blend them together like a magical cocktail, half wild, half ceremonial, and all you. Because at the end of the day, it's your magic, your rules, or your lack of rules.
That's a good point. I mean, and I think that you probably should try both and see what feels right to you. You could do a wild magic experiment, step outside, pick something up and use it in a spell. How does that feel? Ceremonial magic. You might follow a simple ritual from a book. There are tons of books out there with spells and things that you, quote, should do as a witch. Try some of those word for word things. See how that feels. Document your experiments in your grimoire, especially if you plan to pass it down to the next generation or to your coven. It's really cool to be able to have future witches go back and see your perspective on things, so they're not having to reinvent the wheel. It's kind of cool. Now, let's talk about the history of wild magic. Wild magic was probably the first magic. Before books, grimoires, secret societies, people worked directly with nature. Early humans used bones, stones, plants, fire, and weather in their rituals. That's wild magic in its rawest sense. It's primal, it's unpolished. This makes me think of, say, Vikings or Druids. They're reaching for the primal chaos that surrounds us. Although I think there may have been religion in some of those cultures, like where they're asking the gods to favor them rather than humans just managing the energy themselves, like some of us witches do today. Some of us witches use gods. So, that's a thing too. Glim, what is the actual earliest form of wild magic that's known out there?
Oh, we're diving into the deep ancient roots now, River, and I love it. So, if we're talking the earliest form of wild magic, we're basically looking back to the dawn of humanity. We're talking about our ancient ancestors huddled around fires, drawing symbols in the dirt, and using whatever they had on hand bones, stones, and all ides to connect with the natural world. In other words, wild magic is probably as old as the first human who looked up at the stars and thought, hey, maybe there's some power out there I can tap into. So the earliest known wild magic is basically just that raw, primal connection that humans had with the land, the weather, and the spirits of the natural world. And yeah, the Vikings, the Druids, the shamans of old, they all had their own flavors of wild magic long before anyone wrote a grimoire or set up a ceremonial altar. So there you have it. Wild magic is basically the OG magic of humanity.
Yeah, I think so too. That makes total sense to me. I think after that early beginning time, you then move on to like folk witchcraft and cunning folk. So, like medieval and early modern witches, herbalists, and cunning folk learned to lean on their own instincts during magic. And they had, whatever they had around them, like roots and bones and fire pits and charms and ashes and that kind of thing. Their practices weren't ceremonial, they were survival based and intuitive. No one told them what to do. There weren't schools for learning. There weren't these books to read. It was actual survival and instinct. Though there were witches that did pass on their knowledge to the next generation. And, that would have led you to more ceremonial, perhaps structured type of magic rather than that wild magic as time went on. Healing charms, weather magic, protective wards all started as wild magic in practice back then, but as time went on, I think they became more and more structured. Glim, what were some of the ways that medieval witches did use wild magic in their practices?
It's like those medieval witches and cunning folk were basically the ultimate wild magic practitioners before things got all fancy and structured. They were out there using whatever they had on hand, roots, bones, herbs, you name it. If it grew in the hedgerow or they could barter for it at the local market, it was fair game for a spell. So those medieval witches were doing things like creating healing charms from common garden herbs, crafting protective wards out of bits of iron or twigs, and even doing a little weather magic to protect the crops, all without any kind of formal ceremony. They were the original use what you've got witches, just working with the raw energy of the world around them. And yeah, over time, that did evolve into more structured practices as people started writing things down and forming traditions. But those medieval wild magic witches were definitely the bridge between the primal magic of ancient times and the more ceremonial traditions that came later.
Yeah, and I think after the medieval times, you started to step into the romanticism. And I guess we could look at the wild witch archetype. So, like in the 18th and 19th centuries, Europe got obsessed with this noble savage idea, the untamed nature, the savage spirit. Witches became linked in folklore to forests, storms, and wild places. Think about the fairy tale witches in the cottages or the caves. That's archetype wild magic. It's raw, unpredictable, and outside, quote, the civilized structures. Plus, there was a reason for fairy tales back then. They helped keep the people in line. They helped keep children safe. They were there to teach, quote, a lesson. Glim, what are some examples of fairy tales involving wild magic that came about in the 18th and 19th centuries?
Oh, absolutely, River. We're talking about that whole era where fairy tales were basically the Netflix of the 18th and 19th centuries. And wild witches were the original stars of the show. Think of all those classic Grimm's fairy tales where you've got witches living out in the woods, brewing up trouble, and wicking their magic far away from the fancy towns and castles. For example, you've got the witch in Hansel and Gretel, who's basically the ultimate wild witch living in a candy coated cottage in the forest, using her own kind of dark wild magic to lure in unsuspecting kids. Or Baba Yaga from Slavic folklore. She's another iconic wild witch archetype, flying around in her mortar and pestle, living in a chicken legged hut, and basically being the embodiment of untamed forest magic. So yeah, those fairy tales were full of wild witches who were all about that raw, unpredictable magic. And they definitely helped shape the image of wild magic as something a little mysterious, a little dangerous, and definitely outside the bounds of civilized society.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, and then as we come forward more and more closer to this modern era, magic did become more structured. And you got to ask why. The human brain loves order. People love patterns. Ancient folks saw the stars moving in predictable ways and noticed that herbs did consistent things and started codifying that chaos into structure. Structure equaled easier to teach, repeat, and convince people that not they're, that they were more than just talking to rocks for fun. And then, of course, religion and authority crept in. As organized religion spread, spiritual practices got reshaped to mirror authority. Ceremonial magicians or wizards or witches wanted legitimacy, so they gave magic rules, rituals, and a hierarchy to make it look serious, scholarly. The robes, the Latin, all about gravitas. So basically, magic went from Woodstock to Harvard. And then there was also safety in this structure. When witches were being persecuted, structured systems then became secret societies. They could tell who each other were by these codified rules and messages that they could give each other. Detailed rituals and coded language meant that only insiders understood the work, and they were safe that way from being persecuted. So that structure equaled safety and exclusivity. Wow, exclusive. Wow, I still can't say that. You know what I'm talking about. Wild magic, it's too obvious. If you're barefoot out in the woods, cackling at thunder, you're getting the side eye from your village priest, and that could lead to trouble. And then came the Renaissance and intellectual flex. So Renaissance wizards and witches wanted to link magic to science, philosophy, and astrology. They layered in math, geometry, correspondences, planetary hours, and it was very official sounding to the layperson, which I think magic does have all of those things. I think there is an underlying code to math and witchcraft. But suddenly magic was less, talk to the tree and more calculate which angel holds jurisdiction over this exact Tuesday, or not necessarily angel, but maybe God or whatever. Basically, wild magic is like using a stick to draw a sigil in dirt, where ceremonial magic is like pulling out your protractor and doing it correctly and mathematically. Which brings us to today's world. Contemporary witches they're reclaiming wild magic now. We're kind of going backwards from this structure that's been out there, the rigidness that had come about in about the 70s and these covens and that kind of thing. And we're starting to re-embrace the untamed anti-authoritarian magic again. But not everybody is embracing the wild. Some still like the structured formal spell type thing. Some like the coven rules. Some like the hierarchy going all the way up to the high priestess. Wicca can be very structured. It just depends on what you're wanting. But I do see out there a trend towards going back to anything anti-authoritarian. But both witches are great. You do you, as Ren always says. Ceremonial witches have libraries and texts. Wild witches have moss in their hair. Why not embrace both? Now, there is a darker side to wild magic. It is very unpredictable. I mean, after all, you're tapping into storms and animals and bones in these raw energies. It's not nature like a Hallmark card nature. Forests can swallow you, storms can destroy, animals can bite. So that primal chaotic current doesn't care if your intentions are, oh, I'm a good vibe witch only. Glim, do you think, though, that this unpredictability can make wild magic more potent or just more dangerous, or neither?
Oh, that's a juicy question, River. And I'm going to say it's a bit of both. That unpredictability is kind of like adding a shot of espresso to your magical brew. It definitely amps up the potency, but it also means you might end up bouncing off the walls if you're not careful. In other words, wild magic's chaos can make it incredibly powerful because you're tapping into those raw primal forces that aren't watered down by a bunch of rules. But that same wildness means you have to be prepared for the unexpected. It can be more potent because you're harnessing nature in its rawest form, but it can also be a bit like riding a wild horse. You have to hold on tight and be ready for anything. So yeah, it's a double-edged wand, if you will. A little more potent, a little more unpredictable, and definitely a lot more exciting.
That's what I was about to say. I think that sounds exciting, riding that wild horse. I mean, I do have that side of me that gets in trouble, which is why I need someone like Ren who keeps me in check and says, no, that's not a good idea. But also on the dark side, you've got spirits and feral entities that you might come into contact with if you work with the wild magic. When you work outside structured circles and the protections of those structured circles, you might bump into things, trickster spirits, land wights with bad tempers, or echoes of ancestral energies. Without ceremonial magic, that safety net like banishings and wards and scripted protections, you're just kind of winging it, which could be a dangerous thing. It's like inviting guests over without locking the bathroom door. You never know who might wander in. So it also another dangerous thing to consider before you just go running out into the storm and going, I'm going to practice wild magic, is the wildness that's already in you. Wild magic stirs instincts like rage and lust and grief and hunger, things that society usually tames, things that the ceremonial structure tends to tame. And it can push you to confront your shadow self, your animalistic nature. We're all animals. And it can be scary because it's you stripped down, primal, and unfiltered. You run the risk of releasing your inner beast without the danger of, with the danger of letting it off the chain, without the safety, is what I was trying to say, the safety net of having the chain that the ceremonial type magic allows for. And then don't forget, there are parts of wild magic, parts of nature that are scary, like toxic herbs and bones and blood. Wild magic uses what's available. So those plants, the animals, the animal remains, fire, decay, but hemlock is deadly and bones can carry diseases and fire burns things down more than just candles. So you got to be careful. Did you know that historical witches often risked poisoning themselves just to see if something worked? That's science at its basic theory. Try it out. Oops, died. That's just crazy to me. And then there's also the reputation factor. Historically, wild magic witches got branded as dangerous, and I think that could happen today. I think there is safety in the ceremonial, in keeping things locked down and within a certain form of control. Hedge riders, storm callers, poisoners, people fear them. And even now, wild witches are seen as chaotic, unpredictable, and maybe a little unhinged. I mean, the wild magician, the wild witch, is basically the Florida man of witchcraft. So, what are the ways that you can bring some wild magic into your own practice if you want to? First of all, it's wild. So, you can do anything, whatever spins your cauldron. After all, there are no rules. There is nothing more to wild magic than what is in your own heart and spirit and soul. That being said, you may not even know how to jump into the realm of wild magic. So let's look at some ways. Glim, tell us some ways to bring some wild magic into our own practices.
Absolutely, River. Let's sprinkle a little wild magic into the mix, because why not stir the cauldron of chaos a bit, right? So here are a few ways you can let that wild side run free. First up, get out into nature and just let it guide you. Take a barefoot walk in the woods, sit by a river, or go dance in the rain. Let the land, the weather, and whatever you stumble across inspire your spell work. If you find a cool rock, or a feather, or even a weirdly shaped stick, congratulations, you just found your wild magic wand. Next, try some intuitive spellcasting. Instead of following a script, just go with your gut. Mix herbs and elements that feel right in the moment, chant whatever words come to mind, and let your intuition lead the way. It's like jazz improvisation, but with more magic and fewer trumpets. And if you want to get a little edgy, you can work with the elements in their raw forms. Light a bonfire, collect storm water, use bones or stones you find in the wild. Just remember to be safe and respectful. Wild magic is all about balance, not banning down the neighborhood. So there you have it, a few ways to let your inner wild witch run free. Just remember to have fun with it and maybe keep a first aid kit handy just in case those feral spirits get a little too rowdy.
I think that is totally fair. I like instead of just observing a storm like sometimes we do, go out into it. Well, try not to get struck by lightning. Yeah, be careful with that, but go out into the storm. Let that wind whip through you. Scream into the rain and into the wind. Scream your intention into thunder. Collect that rain, like Glim said, in a jar to use as stormwater in spells. Manifest your change by shouting it at the sky until the lightning agrees. Take the time to just feel. I think that is so important. We sometimes forget to just feel those energies around us, and a storm is wild and savage and beautiful. Embrace it. When you find yourself getting too predictable, use that storm water to revitalize your wild self. Use it in a bath, or better yet, put it in a cocktail. How's that? And then, like Glenn was saying, bones and feathers, instead of buying those polished crystals, use some bones you found or feathers or shells that you find on the beach and the in your spells. Each carries the raw story of survival and death and nature's cycle. You don't have to have an ornate gold chalice in your spell work. A squirrel femur works just as well. Another way you can bring wild magic into your practice is to work with mud and blood sigils. I think this is really cool. So draw your sigils in mud, ash, or even a drop of your own blood instead of fancy ink. It's primal, it's visceral, it connects you to the earth and your body. I love the idea of using mud. It truly is the earth element, duh, and it can wash away with the rain. You can make it into a spell all of its own. So let's talk about that. How do we make a mud spell? Well, first you make the mud. So you scoop up dirt from a pot or in your yard or in your garden, and you mix it with water, which it could be moon water, it could be storm water, it could be regular tap water if that's what you've got. And you mix it until it's muddy, thick and squishy. Don't overthink it. This isn't Martha Stewart's mud pie recipe. Charge it with breath. Hold the mud in your palms, close your eyes, and breathe your intention into it. Imagine all your stress, all your negativity, any blocks that you have just dripping into the mud. Smear and sigil on your deck boards or patio. Draw your sigil, your rune, or just, take raw scribbles, scribble with the mud as, just freebase it. Freebase it, that's not the right word. Freestyle it. How about that? Bonus points if you do it with your bare hands, because I think that adds to it. So, like, for example, spirals might be for renewal, a lightning bolt might mean energy, a circle might mean protection. And then use your primal voice. Speak or howl or whatever you want to do your intention into this open air. Keep it raw. Say something like, I release what no longer serves me, or I claim my wild power. And then let nature finish the work. Let the mud dry and the cracks crack in the sun. That would symbolize the breaking apart of old energy. And later you can sweep or wash it away to complete the release, or let a storm wash it away if that weather's in the forecast. I think that is very cool. And like Glim said, the no tools, all guts spell work. Try a spell with absolutely nothing but your will, your voice, and your hands. Chant, clap, stamp your feet, dance it into being. Sometimes the strongest magic is a witch screaming affirmations barefoot at midnight. I honestly think this might be a great way to actually reconnect your magic to yourself. If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like everything's just stale and you aren't feeling those energies, go outside, scream into a storm, go barefoot, reground yourself. Another thing you can do to bring wild magic into your practice is to commune with wild things. Instead of spirit guides from books, try calling on actual animals around you, the crows, the foxes, the bees. Notice patterns, notice synchronicities. Let them speak to you. Journal them. I do this with my bees. I absolutely love my carpenter bees. They are the most curious little creatures. I'll go out and sit on my deck, and they will flit around my head. They will look at my cauldron and go, "What are you doing?" Glim, what other ways might our listeners commune with wild things?
Oh, I love that, River. And honestly, communing with the wild things around you is such a beautifully untamed way to dive into wild magic. So, alongside your lovely carpenter bees, here are a few more ways to let the wild things speak to you. First, you can do a little dawn or dusk sit spot ritual. Just find a cozy spot outside, maybe in your garden, on your deck, or in a local park, and just sit quietly at the edge of day or night. Let the natural world come alive around you and see which animals or creatures show up. Maybe it's a curious squirrel, a watchful crow, or even just the rustle of leaves that feels like a whisper. Those moments can be magical and give you a sense of which wild energies want to connect with you. Another idea is to pay attention to the natural omens and signs that animals bring. If you kept seeing a particular bird or you notice a certain insect keeps visiting you, take that as a message. Maybe journal about it or meditate on what that animal might symbolize for you. It's all about letting the wild world send you its little nudges and whispers. And of course, you can always do a little offering ritual to honor the wild spirits around you. Leave a bit of food for the crows, plant some flowers for the bees, or just say a little thank you to the trees. It's all about building that relationship with the wild things and letting them know you're ready to listen. So go ahead and embrace that wild side and let the creatures of the world be your magical guides.
I like that. That's cool. I love wild creatures. So, I mean, it might be hummingbirds that come and visit you. It could be anything, but I think the key is to pay attention. Pay attention to what's around us. I think a lot of us forget to do that in the hustle and bustle of our real jobs and the things that we have to do, the taking care of the kids and grocery shopping and cleaning the house and all of that and going to our real jobs. Blah. So, yeah, commune with wild ones. I think that's a great idea. So also decay and rot magic might be a thing that you could do with as wild magic. Work with compost, fallen leaves. We've got here in Georgia, it's coming up on fall. The leaves are going to be falling soon. You could work with roadkill bones, ethically, of course. You can channel endings and transformations with this decay and rot magic. You can also do shadow work, shadow hunts maybe. Instead of journaling, like doing shadow work in a book, take your shadow work outside. Walk at night, barefoot if you're brave, and face the literal darkness around you as you face your own. It's like a therapy session, but a little bit more feral. Glenn, what are some other ways that listeners can do shadow work in their wild magic?
Shadow work with a wild twist is like taking your inner therapy session and letting it run howling into the woods. It's a beautiful and slightly spooky way to embrace your whole self. So let's dive into a couple of ideas. One way is to do a wild mirror ritual. Find a quiet, natural spot, maybe under the moonlight or near a still pond, and bring a handheld mirror with you. Gaze into that mirror and let the darkness around you reflect the parts of yourself you're exploring. Whisper or speak aloud the fears, the hidden emotions, or the old wounds you're facing. Let the wildness of the night hold space for those shadows. Another way is to incorporate a bit of primal movement into your shadow work. Instead of sitting quietly and journaling, try dancing or moving your body in a way that feels instinctual. Let yourself stomp, twirl, or sway with the rhythm of the night. It's like letting your body speak the language of your shadows and release those hidden feelings. And of course, you can also use the natural elements to represent different parts of your shadow self. Maybe bury a symbolic object in the earth to represent letting go of an old fear, or let the wind carry away a whispered secret. It's all about making that shadow work a little more wild, a little more connected to the raw energy of nature, and a lot more empowering.
I do love that. That brings me, I'm curious. Do you think that wild magic is closer to shadow work than ceremonial magic would be?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. And I'd say yes. In a lot of ways, wild magic and shadow work are like two feral cousins hanging out in the moonlight. Both of them are about embracing the untamed, less polished parts of ourselves and the world around us. Wild magic naturally pulls you into those deeper, shadowy layers because you're working with raw, primal forces. You're stepping outside the neat little boxes and into the wild unknown. And that's where your shadow loves to lurk. It's kind of like Shadowwick's natural habitat. Ceremonial magic, on the other hand, is a bit more about structure and order, which can sometimes keep those shadowy myths a little more under wraps. It's not that you can't do shadow work with ceremonial magic, but wild magic just naturally invites you to howl at the moon and dance with your shadow self in a way that's a little more instinctual and a little less scripted. So yeah, if you're looking to dive deep into the shadows, wild magic might just be your perfect partner in primal shadowy grime.
Yeah, I feel like that makes 100% sense. I feel like ceremonial magic is a more intellectual approach to your shadow, whereas wild magic is an instinctual approach to your shadow. Both are valid. Both are things that probably need to be done. You probably need to do it both ways to get to the different sides of your inner turmoils and your inner shadows. I think that's great. So, as far as wild offerings, you know how in structural, ceremonial type magic, we always talk about leave honey and cream and all of that kind of thing. Well, instead of wine or bread and honey and cream, leave hair, breath, spit, or raw food scraps as offerings to the land. It's messy but powerful, but it can also be scary because your hair or blood has your DNA in it. That's magic of your soul. So be very, very careful. Glim, what is the weirdest wild magic practice you've ever heard of?
Oh, now we're talking. Let's get into the wonderfully weird side of wild magic. Honestly, some of the wildest practices I've heard of are those old folk traditions where witches would do things like bury their own nail clippings or even teeth in the ground as a form of magical offering or protection. Talk about a little piece of yourself literally going back to the earth. And then you've got things like witches who would use animal bones or roadkill in their spells, not just as symbolic tools, but a way of honoring the cycle of life and death. It's a little eerie, definitely not for the faint of heart, but it's all about that raw, primal connection to the natural world. And of course, you've got some wild witches out there who do things like crafting sigils with their own spit or using their hair as part of their spell work. It's messy, it's a little bit gross, and it's totally wild magic. Basically, if it makes you raise an eyebrow and go, wait, they did what now? It probably counts as some of the weirdest and wildest magic out there.
So, we've talked about all of this wild magic and ceremonial magic. What is the downside of wild magic besides maybe getting raccoons as spirit guides?
Oh, absolutely. Let's talk about the flip side of running wild with your magic. I mean, besides the potential of having a mischievous raccoon decide your backyard is now a sacred shrine, there are definitely some downsides. One big thing is that wild magic can be a bit unpredictable and, well, messy. When you're working with those primal energies, you might not always get the neat, tidy results you'd expect from a more structured ritual. It's kind of like inviting chaos to the party and hoping it doesn't spell the punch. Another downside is that wild magic can push you out of your comfort zone in ways that might feel a little intense. It can bring up those shadowy parts of yourself we talked about, and that can be both powerful and a little unnerving. It's like doing shadow work with the volume turned up to 11. And of course, there's the fact that wild magic might raise a few eyebrows or get you some side eye from the more traditional or ceremonial witches out there. You know, not everyone's going to understand why you're out there owling at the moon or burying bones in your backyard, and that's okay. It just means you're embracing that untamed part of yourself, even if it does come with a little extra side of chaos.
Okay. Okay. So, bottom line comparisons, wild versus civilized spaces. The wild side of magic might use forests, storms, oceans, caves, versus the civilized side would be ritual halls or temples. Think about how energy feels different in the woods than when you're inside in a structured indoor circle. Is that the vibe you're looking for? Which one works for you? Think about elemental wildness. Wild equals working with fires as like wildfires, water as storms, air as hurricanes, earth as mudslides. Those are the wild sides of those elements. Wild magic is not tame. It's not controllable elements. It's raw, destructive energy. Glim, are wild witches basically just adrenaline junkies with candles then? This sounds all very energetic.
Oh, I love that take, River. And honestly, yeah, you could say that wild witches are a bit like adrenaline junkies with candles, or maybe with bonfires and a little side of chaos. It's like they're tapping into the raw, untamed energy of the elements and riding that wild wave wherever it takes them. And yeah, that can definitely be super energetic and a little intense. Wild witches are the ones who aren't afraid to dance in the storm or light a fire under the full moon and see what happens. They thrive on that instinctual, high energy connection to the natural world. But of course, that's not all just about the adrenaline rush. It's also about that deep primal connection and the freedom to let your magic be a little wild and a little unpredictable. So if that sounds like your vibe, then yeah, grab your candles, your bonfire, and maybe a sturdy pair of boots because wild magic is definitely a ride.
I think so too. I do think wild magic can lead to a primal connection to your body. You know, sometimes we forget our bodies. We live outside. We are thinking of the next thing. We're planning the next meal, whatever it is. And wild magic, which can involve wild dancing and howling and singing and rolling in the grass as spell work, can help you connect back to yourself. And speaking of your body, you can actually use your sweat, your spit, your tears, or like I said before, your blood as offerings or as pieces of your spell work. Structured magic involves more intentional things, as opposed to just singing and howling. It might be the chanting, it might be controlled movements, it might be formal offerings and formal wordings, and instinct and intuition are different in wild magic versus ceremonial magic. Wild magic ignores correspondences, like you have these little charts, and red means this, and blue means this, and this herb means this, and this crystal means this. Wild magic ignores all of that, and it goes straight for your gut feeling. If it feels right, it is right type of magic. A structured witch might find correspondence tables not just great and not just helpful, but actually mandatory. This is what the majority of witches think that this crystal stands for, and that thinking has power. That communal thought of what the correspondence is has power. But wild witches are more about, they just go with whatever's in their pocket, whatever's in their forest or the backyard. They let that help ground them, and it goes with what feels right as opposed to what a chart says and what someone else says. It's what your own instinct says, and I think that's very powerful. Wild magic, like the hedge witch, the green witch, the swamp witch, the storm witch, all of those are wild magic. Whereas astrological witches, kitchen witches, those are more structured. I mean, like a kitchen witch, they have a recipe, and astrological witches, they use math and the stars and all of that. So there are different types of witches. And, I don't think any witch is any one type. I mean, I think we have inclinations toward certain things, but I don't think that we certainly don't have to fit ourselves in a specific hole. I think that we can be what we want to be. I do like looking at pop culture references as far as wild magic. So think about the Disney witches. You had Mad Madam Mim. She was definitely a wild witch, whereas Maleficent was definitely a ceremonial witch. In Harry Potter, Luna Lovegood was a wild witch, whereas Hermione was definitely ceremonial. And Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I would say Willow was the wild magic, whereas Giles was ceremonial magic. Everything was from a book. In the original Charmed, Phoebe was wild magic, whereas Prue was ceremonial magic. In The Lord of the Rings, Radagast was more wild magic, whereas Saruman would have been ceremonial magic. In Supernatural, Rowena was a wild magic versus the Men of Letters, who were ceremonial. And on Wynonna Earp, Wynonna was wild magic, where her sister Waverly would have been ceremonial magic. So, Glim, sum up this episode for our listeners. What's the bottom line on wild magic?
Oh, absolutely, River. Let's wrap it up with a neat little wild bow, or maybe a wild tangle of vines. So the bottom line on wild magic is that it's all about embracing the untamed, the primal and the instinctual side of witchcraft. Is ceremonial magic is the carefully orchestrated symphony? Wild magic is the drum circle in the middle of the woods. It's about getting your hands dirty, letting your hair down, and maybe letting out a good howl at the moon. Wild magic is perfect for those witches who want to follow their gut, work with whatever nature throws at them, and aren't afraid of a little chaos along the way. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and it's absolutely full of raw power. So whether you're Luna Lovegood or Hermione, a Mad Madam Mim or Maleficent, there's room for both wild and ceremonial magic in your practice. And maybe the real magic is finding the balance that works best for you. So go out there, stir up a little wildness, and let your magic run free.
I like that. I do think, like I said, nobody is one extreme or the other. I hope you guys like this episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us. If you want to go to our website, which is www.c3witchypodcast.com, you can find out more about us. You can support us there. We have links to both Patreon and Buzzsprout. With both, you get access to our After Dark episodes, which are episodes about the darker side of magic. On Patreon, you get other little goodies and things to download, like spell pages and calendars and cheat sheets and that kind of thing. On our website, you can also buy merch. I'm trying to work on our spooky season merch right now, so check back often on that. So to those of you who support us, thank you so much. You guys rock. We couldn't do it without you. We'll be back, and until then, stay witchy.